Oke, kaga desu ka? Watanabe-dan desu. It's been a long time since I've done one of these, but I think it's time for me to start doing these again because the entertainment industry is going through all sorts of changes, and I like to document this for my students, if nothing else. Let me give you a brief introduction to who I am. My name's Dan, and I've been in the entertainment industry since 1985. So I've seen a lot of strikes come and go. I've seen a lot of business changes happen. I mean, after all, I joined the industry right when the home video world was exploding in a positive direction and fueling all sorts of artistic endeavors that could never have been done otherwise. Do you think without home video, a movie like A Trip to Bountiful or Kiss of the Spider Woman or In Country or pretty much any of those would have been made? And yet they were able to figure out how to make successes. And I think that that is exactly what can happen in the future. So I was vice president at a company now known as Fremantle Media of development, which meant that I looked at projects that were coming in and also did current on some of the projects that we had ongoing. And that included being the current executive on Baywatch for 11 years. Now, I know some of you might say, well, that's hardly a credential. Actually, it is, because some of the deals that Baywatch created in the early 90s are still foundational to the deals for co-ventures in TV series today. Not only that, but Baywatch also taught me personally a lot of lessons in terms of audience flow. For example, when you think of Baywatch, do you think of a show that primarily appeals to rather dirty-minded young men, or would you assume that it's a show that appeals to females 35 plus, leaning non-Caucasian? Guess who the real audience was? You're right, it was females 35 plus, leaning non-Caucasian. It was never not that, by the way. So that's an important thing, is that I learned that side of it. I also worked as a booth executive for a while on Family Feud and on numerous talk shows, and helped select movies for movie packages, and developed over 90 scripts that ultimately 16 of them went to pilot, if not actual series. And I was even there for a bit when they were starting out converting Pop Idol into American Idol. So yeah, I can talk a lot of the business stuff. You told me when I was at USC that one day I would be able to discuss the business of entertainment and teach classes in it on a fairly consistent basis. I would have said, you're out of your mind. There's no way I'll ever learn this stuff. But suddenly I turned around one day and, well, here we are. So today what I'd like to do is to give my 2 cents, and that might be all it's worth, but on what's going on with the Writers Guild and their strike. Let's get the big question out of the way. I do support the writers on this, and I do support the fact that they are in a really bad catch-22, as are the executives. The industry has been going through several paroxysms of mismanagement and believing their own BS. Let's be real. Let's be real. There's no one who had been in the industry for a long time, and there's a lot of people who are there right now who have been there this long time, so they don't have an excuse, who, when streaming first started and first started gaining traction, didn't look at it and say, wait a minute, there's no way we can justify these costs based on ultimately being able to return on investment. So there is a lot of reality that is coming down the pike, because as hard as it may be a pill to take, the industry is right now being looked at by Wall Street, not in terms of the increase in subscribers for streaming or the increase even in annual revenues, but is looking at profits. And this is one area where the entertainment industry right now is in serious trouble. So the Writers Guild is trying to make their pitch at an economically very bad moment. And I believe that some of the information that's going out to writers through the Guild is fanciful in terms of what can be expected. Certainly it's not 2018 anymore. So the kind of business arrangements that were common in 2018 and even into the early days of the pandemic aren't going to fly. So some of their requests, such as setting a minimum on the number of people who will be in a writer's room, I think it's a non-starter. And I hate to say that because I do agree that that having more people there certainly can create a greater diversity of opinion and overall creativity. But that goes hand in hand with actually focusing on what's needed, not only to make a program or a movie artistically good, but also make sense financially. And this is a subject for a future video, but right now that discipline isn't there yet. So I don't think the studios will budge on that one. Where I think they will budge, and this is the win-win, would be for them not to hold people to exclusive contracts. It makes no sense for you to be writing only on 6 episodes, not even be there when they're doing the final drafts, and then be held until the next season is gonna come up, and perhaps it gets dropped at the last minute, so you really don't have an ability to make money. I think they're going to have to bend on the idea of exclusivity and allow people to do more than one job as long as they don't technically overlap. And in the same way with actors, especially when you were using actors on lower budget material, you could always work your bigger star around their availabilities. And guess what? Sometimes you have to make a mockery of your production schedule because you had to film out an actor because they had a commitment with another movie. You just do it. So I think that's going to be a given. The other issue that I think is going to be a concern is the fact that the Directors Guild settled the way it did, and so quickly, because the Directors Guild tends to be the voice of reason. And it's not because directors aren't crazy and egomaniacs and do all that other stuff, but the Directors Guild as a union is bifurcated. And what I mean by that is you have a certain percentage of the Directors Guild members being people who are in fact above the line directors. Above the line meaning that they are the creatives, and that's the director, writer, producer, and actor in a movie. In other words, think of it as something that can be on the poster as an advertising item. I know writers aren't really that right now, although they should be. But that's above the line. Below the line are the crafts, the editors, the cinematographers, the sound people, the first assistant director, all of these jobs. Now, the Directors Guild also has unit production managers and first assistant and second assistant directors. So it has people who aren't necessarily in the club level where everyone's making multiple millions per picture. I mean, you can still afford to send multiple kids to an Ivy League university and not worry about becoming homeless if you're a first assistant director who's worked a number of years in the industry. But it's not that kind of, okay, I'm living in Beverly Hills and I just have to decide whether I'm going to be in the rises or in the flats. No, you're not in that position, but you're certainly in a position where you are indeed more than very comfortable. You're pretty close to being in the top 1%. However, you do need to work continually. Therefore, whenever there's a strike, the Directors Guild members do want to get back to work. Now, why are the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild so different? Because in those two guilds, the majority of their members really don't make the bulk of their money from the entertainment industry. They make, quite honestly, a lot of their money doing the jobs that are in between their entertainment industry gigs. Nothing wrong with that. But realistically speaking, if you're going to go on strike and you don't really work in the industry all that much, you can keep the strike going forever on principle, because for the majority of the membership, it doesn't really impact them. And it's a horrible thing to say, but it's also true. So therefore, those two unions in particular can remain on strike. Now, the worst Writers Guild strike that I went through personally was the 1988 one. And that ultimately took multiple years, if not nearly 2 decades, for people to make back the money they lost in the strike. So we're going to hope that this strike does not run that long. I don't think it will, actually. The DGA got some pretty good settlements in theirs, and I think that the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild can build on those. The Screen Actors Guild, by the way, has the same kind of issue that the Writers Guild has, that unfortunately a lot of their members are doubling down on, and I think rather unfortunately, and that is the desire to get paid for their auditions. I think that that's an unreasonable ask, and it's ultimately going to backfire against many of the members, because to demand getting paid for every audition means you're just not going to audition that many people, and therefore the opportunities will be a lot less. I do think that once you get into multiple auditions for the same role, yeah, I think you're justified to ask for that. But I think, and I'm sorry, I don't know this directly, I think you already can get paid if it's above a certain number of auditions that you've gone to for it. So we'll see what happens there. Either way, the biggest problem is trying to get money from residuals, because once something went to streaming and it technically exists forever on the cloud, you don't have that ability to launch reruns the way you did in the past. You also create a problem for that by not having enough episodes to actually do a rerun. And it's further complicated by the almost gleeful way that streaming triumphed over the elimination of physical media. That was the big mistake. I'm not saying the DVD hadn't already, and Blu-ray and 4K, it's all the same. I'm not saying that they weren't already in the downward fall. They were, clearly, and streaming needed to white knight and come in and provide a new area of revenue. But it shouldn't have been killed as thoroughly as it was, because there was still a lot of life left in it. And the way it became fashionable to say, I'm getting rid of all my DVDs, was a mistake, because as we've seen with the most recent French Connection issue, where the movie gets censored and has lines of dialogue removed for its streaming version, it makes having a physical copy of it very desirable. I mean, trust me, I've been collecting videotapes since the 70s. And even though I've converted most of them to digital media, there's a lot of stuff that's never been available since then. So there's a real benefit in having the physical media. Yes, I know Disney is now announced that they're going to release a 4K remastering of French Connection. So maybe this was a publicity stunt. I'm hoping it was, because that would be a very good thing. Anyway, what I would like to do in the future is to go over some of the reasons that the industry is in the situation it's in right now, and perhaps provide some insight onto ways out of it, because there's so many ways out of the predicament that they're in right now. And the main reason why a lot of them haven't even been attempted yet, despite people who should know better in the C-suite, is that it takes too much work. But you know what? It is show business. You focus on one word too much and you will F up the other one. And it's about time for them to go back to taking care of the creative side.
On the avenue, I'm taking you to 42nd Street.